All right, let's talk about the Localizer 27 circle to land runway 18 right in Memphis, Tennessee. We're going to be flying this in a CJ3 with Proline 21 Avionics. And today we've departed out of Memphis on the BB King 7 departure in this scenario. And while on the departure, for some reason, we had to turn around and come back to Memphis. So ATC has turned us around and put us on vectors. They've advised us that we can expect the Localizer 27 circle to land runway 18 right. And we're starting our descent, so we accomplish our descent checks, and we're going to go through the 5 A's for getting ready for the approach. So the framework of the 5 A's is ATIS, altimeter, avionics, approach briefing, and aircraft. So the first A, ATIS, we listen to the ATIS, we have the weather. The next A, altimeter, we put in our altimeter setting. All right, and then the next A for avionics, we're gonna build the approach with the avionics and the radios. So I use a flow, and the flow is enter the approach into the control display unit. Then we come up to the MFD and look at the charts to get our minimums, and then come over to the PFD where we'll enter our barrel minimums into the PFD. Then we come back down to the control display unit and do our performance. Okay, so this is how it looks. We go down to the control display unit and hit the depart arrive button, and we select the Localizer 27. Make sure we select the Loc 27, not the ILS 27. And we're going to use the initial approach fix of grit, and we execute that. We come up to the multifunction display, the MFD, and we bring up the chart for the Loc 27. We look at our minimums, and we see our minimums for this circling approach is 940 feet. So then we go over to the primary flight display, but first we hit the refs button on the display control panel and come to the right side of the PFD, and we select the barrel mins and dial those into 940 feet. And then don't forget to hit the return button on that screen. And come down to the control display unit. We hit the perf button, and we select approach, enter all the ATIS information in there, and check our landing data and our V speeds. They look good. We send them. We look up at our speed tape, and our V speeds should be posted. So that flow that we just went through, an easy way to remember it is just by where your hand goes to get things accomplished. So it starts with the control display unit, comes up to the MFD for charts, comes over to the PFD for entering the minimums, and then back down to the control display unit for your landing data, your performance. All right, so we have that all set up, and we've got our descent and approach checks done. But I'm sorry, let me back up. So we have our avionics. That was the third A. Now the fourth A is approach briefing. So we brief the approach. Once that's done, we get to the last A, and that is airplane, and that is a reminder to do all your checks. So your descent and approach checks, those are complete. All right, so everything is set up, looking good, and we're getting vectors. ATC's got us down to 3,000 feet. Looks like that's going to be the final altitude, because outside grit is the initial approach fix is at 3,000 feet. And we're getting close, so we're going to be looking to get a speed of 150 to 180 knots. And then ATC calls and says the number 502 Whiskey Bravo, turn left, heading 320, maintain 3000 until established. You are clear for the Localizer 27, circle to land, runway 18 right. All right, so the words clear for the approach, that's my cue to come up to the mode select panel and hit the approach button. Then I come over to my altitude select and select in there 940 feet. One thing I forgot to mention is we need to sequence the approach. I'd probably do that before I hit approach, by the way. And how I do that is I come down to the control display unit. I find grid, initial approach fix. I select that, and then I put it to the blue. What that does is creates grid as my from waypoint, grind as my to waypoint, and extends that final approach course out beyond grid for me, and I can intercept that. So I got that done. I hit approach, dialed in 940 feet because that's the minimum altitude or the MDA on the approach. And we're getting vectored, got all that set up, and once we see the course come alive, and we'll know that by getting green needles in front of us on the PFD, on the pilot side, and on the co-pilot side. And we'll see Loc 1 on the left-hand side of the PFD as our active nav source. And as soon as we see that, we come up to the mode select panel, I push nav and VNav. So, and we push nav and VNav, it creates a vertical path, and that is why we set 940 in our altitude pre-select, because in nav VNav mode, it won't let us descend unless we have an altitude lower, like the MDA. So we've captured the localizer for our lateral guidance. We selected nav, VNav, and now we have a vertical path that the FMS has created to get us down to IPEPI, the final fix on the approach. All right, so while I'm on the intercept, I'm starting to slow down a little bit. Or actually, no, I'm just keeping 155 knots. And then we've intercepted the localizer. We're on the course of 273, and we're level at 3000. Once I see the vertical path is 1 dot away, gear goes down. Once I see that I'm on the vertical path, I check, make sure my flaps are at 15, and we keep them there. And that's my cue to do the before landing checklist. Before landing checklist is run. And now I'm slowing to 130 knots, or VT if you look at your speed tape. And it's pretty much always VT is 130. Just a good speed to catch on to. And we're heading to grind. And once we pass grind, we're going to be on a vertical path from grind to IPEPI. IPEPI is the last fix, and that altitude for that fix is 980 feet. So that's part of the vertical path that's been derived. While I'm on the approach here and I have time on the descent, I like to take a lap or two around the PFD. So starting with the nav source, check that. Okay, we got Loc 1, got green needles. Right above the navigation source, there's a space for messages. We check those, make sure there's nothing there that we need to attend to. And then we come up to the speed tape, make sure our V speeds are there. Check our speed at 130 knots. Come up to the flight director window, and we should see in green Loc 1 on the top line showing active. And then we'll see on the top middle, we'll see AP for autopilot on, and we'll see the green arrow below it pointing towards the left side. So that's where our guidance is coming from, the left side PFD, if you will, or what is displayed on the left side PFD. And then in the top right side of the flight director window will be V path, and then below that you'll see ALTV, ALT-V, displayed in white below that, indicating that that's the next altitude that we're going to get captured if we leave everything the way it is. Alright, so we're at 130 knots, flaps 15, coming down. We're about, let's say, 2 miles outside of Ipepe. Check our vertical speed. It looks like it's about 600 feet a minute or so. Looking good. Looks like we're going to capture 980 at Ipepe. But we really don't want to capture 980 at Ipepe. We want to fly through Ipepe at 980 and continue down to 940. The way I like to do that is deselect VNAV, hit vertical speed, and then that'll activate the altitude that's in the altitude pre-selector, and the autopilot will capture that. One thing I check is I just make sure that I'm not going to be descending too fast, that I get to 980 before Ipepe. And you can even back off the vertical speed by 100 feet or so, just to make sure you're at or above 980, and then down to 940, the MDA. All right, so things are looking good. We deselected VNAV, we have vertical speed. We're passing Ipepe. We're going down to 940 now, and the airport is coming into view. So we call the tower and say, number 502 Whiskey Bravo, we have the airport in sight. And they come back and say, number 502 Whiskey Bravo, you're clear to circle to north and clear to land runway 18 right. So, but before that, as we're starting to capture 940, as we notice the nose starting to pitch up to capture that altitude, now we need to add a little power. Just gently add power, and so that we just stay at 130 or 125 to 130. That's the speed I want for the circle. And so you add a little power, maintain that 130, 125. It levels out nice. And if I haven't already, dial my heading out to 300 degrees. So we're on a heading of 273, dialed it to 300 for the turn on the circle. And I push the heading bug and let the autopilot fly this. Let the autopilot do it. It's very hard to hold altitude for the circle, so let the autopilot fly it. So we had 300, we hit heading, the airplane starts making the turn, looking to the airport, looking at the runways, looking for runway 18 left, 18 center, and 18 right. And then also we have runway 27, and I use that as a reference because we know at the departure end of 27 is in the vicinity of the beginning of runway 18 right. So I can use that to help me gauge where I should be in space for a good base to final position, and use the heading knob to make my turns. So I headed out on that heading of 300 until I'm a good base distance away, and then I turn my heading bug to 270 to parallel runway 27. I get runway 18 right in sight, and then sometime prior to disconnecting the autopilot, I'll put flaps to land, and if you do it soon enough, the autopilot will trim everything out for you. But if you wait to do it at the last second, that's fine too. But anyway, when you're in the key position, the flow I use is from right to left across the cockpit here. So the first thing on the right is flaps to land, throttles I bring them back, autopilot disconnect, and then push the nose down, start a gentle bank turn on that base to final turn, and I'm looking to runway 18 right, and I'm looking at my vertical speed. So back and forth, and keep that scan going between the runway and vertical speed. Runway, vertical speed, runway, vertical speed, runway, vertical speed. Very important. If you fixate on the runway or you fixate on the vertical speed, it doesn't work well. And the reason I say runway vertical speed is because it's hard to maintain a good vertical speed unless you're looking at the vertical speed tape. We want to shoot for 600, 700 feet a minute, depending on where you set yourself up, how far out you are on your base. But vertical speed and the runway, vertical speed, runway, maintain 500, 600, 700 feet a minute. And we're aiming for the touchdown zone markers or the aiming point markers. You'll see, if this is at night, you'll see the touchdown zone lighting. And remember, that's 3,000 feet of lights. So we want to land in the first, around the 1,000-foot mark of the runway. So, and ACS standards allows us to land, 200 feet early to that aiming part marker to 500 feet beyond. So keep it, but just keep it simple and land right on the aiming point markers or on that touchdown zone, and it'll be good. And remember, VREF and a nice gentle descent rate, and everything should work out well.